Hi there, I'm Erica with the Needle and Thread, and in this quilt tutorial that we're going to work through this month, we're going to be working on a quilt that I think is just fantastic. It is called the Posh Blossom Quilt, and it is by So Kind of Wonderful. And as you can see, it is filled with curves. Now, most people, most quilters especially, are going to look at this and say, oh no, I cannot sew curves. But So Kind of Wonderful has made the process so easy and so user-friendly that you're going to want to make this quilt and so many of their other quilts using curves. Now, part of the process that they have developed is to use these rulers. Now, they all basically do the same thing. We're just in different sizes. We have the quick curve ruler, we have the mini quick curve, and we have the Wonder Curve. Now, the Wonder Curve is really nice because it allows you to cut curves for several different sizes with one ruler. But what else is really nice about these rulers is that you not only get to cut your curves, but you can also use them to square up those blocks once you have made them. So we're going to go through the process of cutting, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. But we're also going to look today at the color choices that they have, that we're going to use. Now, they have used this particular color palette, and to represent each one of the colors, you might see two different fabrics in this pattern, but I have made a little bit of an adjustment. I tried to replicate their color scheme as closely as I could with my own fabrics. But what I do want to show you too is you don't have to, using the same pattern, you don't have to use just these fabrics. You can go about creating a color scheme that is right for you. A nice thing that they have done for everyone who buys a pattern is to include on the inside of the pattern sheet an outline drawing of the quilt. Now, I know that this is really hard for you to see because it's not printed very dark, but what I want you to think about is when you buy this pattern, to use this color sheet, design your quilt for yourself, and then go ahead and purchase your fabrics based on that. So what I want to do is to show you some options that you can have in designing your quilt. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. It can look like one of these other quilts that I've put together using the color sheet that's included in the pattern. Let's take a look. So no matter how you decide to put your quilt together in terms of the colors and the combination and the layout, we're going to come back to this color combination that we have here so that you can follow along and see how I label, how I sort and cut each one of my fabrics so that I can create this particular looking quilt. Now, the colors that they want for us to have, and it shows in the pattern, they want a pink, a raspberry, what they call a citrine, they want 3 blues, a white, and a gray. So the gray, of course, is going to be my background. When you read your pattern, it will tell you exactly how many, you can see it right here, you can see exactly how many of each color it wants you to cut. Now, if you choose to do a different colorway and drop in your own colors, make sure that you are not only changing the colors here for your amounts, but you're counting how many of each one of those curved pieces you're going to need for your pattern. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you exactly how to go about cutting these curves using the rulers so that we can get to the machine and start to sew. let's go and cut. So here we are at our cutting station, and I have all of my fabrics laid out for you. Now, the instructions here are very clear. For this first A block, there are 2 blocks that we're going to make. For the A block, the pattern lines out exactly how many of each one of the colors it wants. It wants 16 raspberry, it wants 16 pink, 16 citrine, the forest green, which is going to be this one, it's going to be a blue, 8 of that. We want 8 of this blue, 8 of that blue, and then 16 white. And so what I'm going to show you right now is how to measure to get these arcs. Interestingly enough, you're able to get 2 of these arcs out of 1 square. To do that, we're going to go ahead and use the pink. And I'm just going to do 1 of them at a time. Now, once you start getting good at cutting these, you're going to be able to cut maybe 3 layers of fabric at one time. But for now, we're just going to start with 1. Okay, so here we have our first fabric. I have my trusty marking pen. This one is a friction pen. This one is a friction, and the nice thing about the friction is that it will erase with heat. So the pattern wants me to measure 7 inches from this corner over to here, and from this corner to here. So that's the first thing we're going to do. I'm going to line up the curve with the corner on one side and the bottom mark that I made. Now remember, please remember that consistency is key. So if you have a tendency to cut leaning against the inside curve, make sure you lean on the inside curve for all of your cuts. If you have a tendency to lean on the outside curve, make sure that you do that on all of your cuts, but consistency is key. So I'm leaning on my outside curve all the way around. Done. Now, I don't want to move my fabric at all. I'm going to move my ruler. Here's my mark on the top of my fabric. I'm going to line up the arc with that and with the bottom point. Flip my ruler over, line them up, and again on the outside edge of the arc, I'm going to just carefully cut along. And now I can go ahead and move my fabric. There we go. Almost had it. It was so close. But what I have now are 2 perfectly equal arcs, okay? Now on the pattern, it says, this is my pink. On the pattern, it says I need 16 of these. I have 2 of them here. You can cut several at a time. So let's do that, okay? And I'll show you how. Make sure that as you cut them several at a time, and I'm going to just do 3 layers. 3 is going to yield me 6. Make sure that your layers are all facing in the same direction. So they're all facing up, and please make sure that they're all lined up very, very well. Because remember, consistency is the key, right? So we need 7 inches. Here's my pen, making my quick marky mark. 7 inches across the top. And then, so there's my first mark. Here's my corner. And just to make sure, I'm cutting it again to make sure that I made it all the way through, right? Okay. Here's my top mark and my bottom corner. Very nice. Okay, let's try it again, just to make sure I made it all the way through. Oh, look, I did. There's one, and there's the other. Sweet. Okay, so now I have 6 curves that I did all at one time. Now, I'm going to do that with the rest of my rectangular pieces so that I now will have enough for all of those inside curves. Now, the next thing that I want to do is to work with the triangles. Okay, so let's look at that. With each one of the blocks, this is a block that we're trying to put together. With each one of the blocks, we need an inside curve, which you just watched me make. Now we need the outside of the curve, okay? So that's what we're gonna use these triangular pieces for, to make the outside. And in the instructions, it says to clip off 1/2 of an inch off of the tips. So let's do that. Okay. So we're going to measure 1/2 of an inch in, and just use the blade and trim that off. Come over to the other side. Half of an inch in and trim that off. Now, once I have my tips trimmed off, it's now time for me to cut the curve. And to cut the curve, I'm going to line up the ruler with the bottom points. The bottom points, not the top points. The bottom points. This is such an ingenious way of doing this. Love it, love it, love it. And again, I'm going to cut on the outside curve, right? If only rotary cutters worked like they should. Okay, so look at this. We have that outside curve, and if I was going to put it together with one of those inside curves, it works together just like this. You see that there's a little bit of overhang, important, because you have a seam allowance to contend with, but the two pieces fit together beautifully. So I'm going to show you how to do this one again, this outside curve one more time, and just like the inside curve, you can batch cut them. So I'm going to just do 3 of them at one time so that you can see how that works. Again, please make sure that all of your pieces line up exactly the same if you are cutting them together, so that your cuts are consistent. Okay, good. All 3 of them, 1/2 of an inch off. I really don't want to turn it because I have a nice big stack. So I'll turn my ruler instead and go from the side. Here we go. All right. So now we have the 1/2 inch cut off of each side, and I'm going to line up my curve with the bottom points of my triangle. Make sure that when you're using your ruler, you don't put forward pressure on it or sideways pressure. Make sure you're pushing straight down on the ruler to keep any shifting from happening. Drum roll, please. Okay, fine. It's being stubborn. There we go. So we have 3 pieces now that are cut exactly the same. We have the inside and we have the outside. So I'm going to continue to do that with all of my colors. Well, I don't have one for this, but for all of my colors, I'm going to do this outside curve. And then we can go to the wall and see everything laid out. Yikes. We went through quite a bit today. We talked about the ruler. I introduced the quick curve ruler to you. We talked color. You've seen some different colorways that you could use to lay out your quilt. We looked at how to use the quick curve ruler. We cut some of the pieces and look at the first stages of the project. So we have the inner curve and we have the outer curve. This whole quilt is made with just these 2 pieces alone. It is really not difficult. And so when you get a handle on how to cut with a ruler, and then in the next lesson, how to actually sew these curves with the super cool technique that doesn't include any pinning, it's just going to fly by so very quickly. So I want you guys to make sure you come back for the next video where I'm going to actually show you how to sew, how to press, how to square up those pieces, those blocks that you've made, and then see the layout, the final layout for this quilt. It's going to be so much fun and so exciting, and I hope to see you back here. See you later.